Hi, and thank you for joining us. I'm Jimmy Edgerton, and we're going to talk today about transitions in life and specifically transitions into retirement. Joining me on my left is Bob Emery, and Bob has a rich practice history of over 29 years in Minneapolis and retired there in November of 2011. And on my right side is Dr. Deepak Gangahar, who's been in Nebraska for over 30 years of his career. And during that time transitioned from active clinical practice to being an administrative post of the president of the Nebraska Heart Institute and is planning another transition. And I think there's a little irony about what we do as heart surgeons. And I've said for so much of my life that to be a great heart surgeon, I believe heart surgery has to be who you are, not what you do. But in order to successfully retire, heart surgery has to be what you do and not who you are. And I have no idea how you make that transition. Well, for my situation, that transition was made abruptly and without warning. When I sustained an injury and came down with a denervation myopathy in my left hand that prohibited me from operating. And having not prepared for it, I've learned some lessons. And we all want to try to share with you some lessons because many physicians fail miserably when they try to retire. You've seen them, they hang around the doctor's lounge, they're unhappy, they haven't maintained a relationship with their wife, and life, when it should be full of joy, is full of misery. Life is transitions, and those who can successfully reinvent themselves are the successful individuals. And we should look at retirement as the same thing. It's at least two more reinventions. Reinvent ourselves not as an active clinical physician any longer, and then eventually reinvent ourselves for the transition to becoming infirm, giving up independent decision making, and dying. But we're not quite there yet. I will tell you, I want to talk for just a moment about some of the psychological aspects of retirement. And having studied this, I think that preparing for retirement is a 3 to 5 year process. And it takes some time to get yourself ready. And I actually came up with 12 steps or 12 points that I think you should address. And they fall into 3 regions. The first 4 are getting you ready. The next 4 are things to maintain happiness in your early stages of retirement. And the last 4 are preparing for that final transition, slowing down and pulling back altogether. I think it's important to engineer a soft landing, to slow down for a couple years before you proceed. Learn to say no to some of the responsibilities. This may sound a little controversial, but I think it's also important to learn to not be addressed as doctor. When you transition into a different segment of society, many of us keep very narrow social circle. And I've seen so many guys that move into a retirement community and they're totally alone because they want everyone to call them doctor. I think that you need to not count on your hobbies alone to fill your time. Because I've seen so many people say, I used to love the golf, now I hate it. I can't do it every day any longer. I think that along with that, you need to search for a new passion. And there are ways you can do that by keeping a happiness log and actually finding out where your new interests are lying, where they're leading you. Moving on to what you're going to do in the early stages of retirement, you need to make peace with the fact that you're not going to earn the kind of money that you might think that you're worth. And you'll find ways to continue to have contributions, and one of them is I suggest you seek benevolent work during the course of all that. The surest way to get outside of yourself if you're getting depressed, and I did, is to give back to someone else. That takes you out of yourself better than anything else I do. Do something no one else wants to do. I picked up utilization review. Nobody else wanted to do that. Organize the neighborhood crime watch. Nobody wanted to do that. But there are things that I could contribute. If you have been active in publishing, I would suggest you continue actively as long as you can. If you haven't, learn how. Have someone, because you have a lot to contribute, and now you have time to write it. I think it's important to check your ego at the door. Take any menial chores that come about and work on them. And finally, a couple points as you move on. You can dedicate yourself to your family. Move to where your kids are. Where do they need your help while they're building their careers? While we're talking about family, remember your wife's life isn't changing. Yours is, and you're going to impact her tremendously. Plan some time apart so that her life isn't so negatively impacted by you suddenly demanding all of her time. And perhaps most important is stay positive, because the people around you respond to you by what you project. It was Viktor Frankl that said, the last and greatest of mankind's freedoms is to choose his attitude in any given situation. And learning to stay positive all the time was a difficult step for me when I wasn't feeling happy at all inside. I hope some of those points will help you doing a psychological preparation. Like I said, I think that takes a couple of years, but there are other preparations. There are financial preparations and health preparations. And Bob, why don't you talk about your experience a little, tell us what your thoughts are.
Okay, thank you, Jimmy. My separation from practice was more abrupt than I wanted it to be due to health reasons in my family. I needed to be more available. And I do have to disagree a little bit with one thing Jimmy said, is that while retirement doesn't change your wife's life, during our practice we were away from each other a lot. And when I stopped, we could be together more and do more things together. For instance, we've been to more plays and movies, and I'm not an art critic freak, than in the past 2.5 years than the prior 30. But my practice for retirement began when I was 21, actually, because I had 22, because I had to quit being an athlete at a world-class level on the United States international team and become a doctor. So you gave up something that you spent 5 years, 4 to 6 hours a day working at, to do something else. And that's one of the lessons, is prepare to do something else early and not just try and find something as you're going out. The second thing is, to do that, you have to be assured that you and your family are financially safe, which again means planning early and starting at the beginning to make sure your 401k is fully funded, make sure your IRA, both you and your wife, is fully funded, put some in savings and investments, and be sure to get yourself debt-free before you retire. That is, while you have an income, pay off your house, if you have a boat, if you have a vacation house. Once you retire, any money that goes into that secondary process with the interest involved comes out of your lifestyle. And you may need that money that you have returning from your investments to your lifestyle. Another way to help save some money when you retire is to start a Roth IRA when you're 59 and a half, and while you have disposable income, transfer money from a traditional IRA to a Roth. It still grows tax-free, but it can be taken out also tax-free once you've had the Roth. And why don't I stop there for time and let you go on and Deepak run from your end.
I think that's an excellent idea, but I do want to come back to you in a little bit, and I'm going to ask you, how do you know when you have enough money? How much money are you going to need in retirement? Is it the same that you're spending now? How do you gauge that? I'm sure you have some wisdom for us there.
I can tell you how I calculate it, actually.
Dr. Gangahar, why don't you tell us about your experiences a little and your viewpoints on this?
You know, I'm blessed. I'm truly blessed. To me, 3 things are very important: your health, your family, and financial independence, in that order. If you don't have health, it doesn't matter what kind of family you have. You become a burden on the family. Rather than being an anchor for them, you become a burden on the family. And you can live with this less amount of money, but you cannot live without the health. To me, health is number 1, and number 2 is family. Number 3 is financial independence. From my perspective, there are 3-4 things which are important before we plan for retirement. I made slightly disagree with Jimmy. Firstly, what Bob said when he talked about financial independence, Roth IRA is government's gift, Uncle Sam's gift to us. Last year they changed the rule. In fact, there used to be a limit that if you earn above certain amount, you cannot contribute to Roth IRA. And that law has changed. Now, everybody can contribute to Roth IRA.
I didn't know that.
I have advised my kids. I've been putting money in their Roth IRA when they couldn't afford it, because that's the biggest saving that one must have. There's no excuse not to have a Roth IRA. And second is, well, there are different formulas. Some people say you should save 10% of your net that you get in your hand. Some people say 30% of you should be saving. Unfortunately, Americans don't save. Less than 3% is saving they attain. But usually what they say is that you should retire when you can take out 4% of your savings, and they will last your expected lifespan. And I'm even more conservative. I'll share my thoughts on that aspect a little later. But coming to planning for retirement, in my way of thinking, at least that's the way I conducted myself, you should begin to plan retirement the day you take your first job. You shouldn't be thinking of retiring at 60 or 55. You need to plan to retire at age 30.
What if we're 62 and 63 and we haven't planned for that? Now what do we do? Is all lost? Do we have no hope?
No, I think, if you planned your retirement you pointed that at 62 you decided to retire and you didn't think beforehand. Is that what your issue is? Yes. Well, I think that's a challenge. First, it's financial independence. If you didn't save money for the last 62 years, 3 years not enough time to save enough for you to live to age 80, 82 that most Americans tend to live at. Men 78, women 82. But other thing is, at age 62, you can acquire hobbies. You need to have hobbies to keep you busy, whether it's playing bridge, whether going for dancing, whether reading books. In my example, all my life, we belonged to a group, discussion group, a group of 30, 40 people, and everybody was supposed to give a talk on one subject once a month and be a host for dinner. And there's a tremendous way of learning from each other. They were politicians, business people, professional, different diverse group of people. And I carry the same thing to my family. My friends, close friends, my family members, we get together once a month to talk about anything they want to talk about.
And in doing so, you've diversified your social contacts
Exactly,
also.
exactly.
Expanded those. You and I have spoken, and I know you value health and have taken some steps to do that. Are there any secrets or pearls that you have for us there?
Well, I think we all are different. We all react to our circumstances. I lost my dad at age 48, so we're acutely aware of heart disease. And I think he died certainly probably from heart. So I've been very careful with my diet, exercise, not smoking, drinking in moderation. And I've been running distance all my life. And I ran half a marathon 2 years ago. But as you grow older, as they say, it's not the survival of the fittest. It's the survival of the one who can adapt the best. I used to run distance. I used to play 3 times a day racquetball. Age 66, I changed. Now I'm bicycling. I'm riding treadmill. I'm hiking more. And perhaps if I live to 70, I'll probably start going on cruises and so on. But the thing is, one needs to adapt to the change. And other point is, I like to make a point, that is, when to retire. Timing is critical. There's a Japanese, in fact, Okinawa saying, hara hachibu. They say in Okinawa, you should quit eating when you're 80% full. Don't stuff yourself. And Jimmy, you and I talked about, we're all indispensable. You think they cannot do surgery without you? You're kidding yourself. So when I made a decision.
When someone tells me they're indispensable, I tell them, take 2 months off. And when you come back, see if they remember your name.
So when I told my group that I'm going to retire at 65, and they asked me, can you carry on for 5 more years? I said, no, thank you very much. I will not practice anymore. So I follow the principle. I could have done operative for 5 more years, but I walked away because I have hobbies and interest to keep me going.
Will you expand a little bit on your issues? Number one is I completely agree with you on your 3 points. We did the same thing when I got my first job after residency. We took 10% of every single paycheck we ever got and invested it. And so we became comfortable. Ann and I exercise basically 5 days a week, take 2 days off, a combination of either aerobic or
Strength.
running or treadmill or elliptical or core exercises to keep our cores strong, even something as simple as balancing on one foot with your eyes closed for 15 seconds. And there are days I don't want to do it, but there were days I didn't want to go in the operating room either, but you got to put your nose to the grindstone and do it. I calculated my amount I needed because when I became employed out of private practice and was making less, we were doing most everything we wanted on the net pay of that salary. So I use that as a calculation, and that happened when I was about 60 years old. So I used that amount to calculate what I would need to have away before I could really retire and feel that I was financially independent. So I use that salary as the base.
I've always said that the key to having enough money is don't need much. And we do learn from things early in our life. And I had two things that taught me a lot. I had a sudden death episode when my son was an infant, and it changed the way I lived. And before I did anything else, I put away money for my kids' retirement in case that should happen again. And at one point, I was buying from a group of practice that I created, getting a house at the same time, and I was tremendously overextended. And I looked at my wife and I said, honey, what if I fall on my face? We'll lose it all. And she said, baby, are we any happier now than when we lived in that one-bedroom apartment on the Intercoastal Waterway? And I was the only one supporting us on my nurse's salary? We're no happier now. We're going to be just fine no matter what you do. So I had a great partner along the way also.
We travel better now, though.
Yeah, travel.
Jimmy, sorry. I was going to say, one point that must be made is we all must have estate planning. If we don't do that, Uncle Sam will suck it up all the way. And second point is, I came from India. Both our kids are born American. And my comment to them is, mom and dad's job is to give you education, give you good values, but don't expect any estate from mom and dad. If we can make it, you were born here in this blessed land in the world, you can do better than us. So we had estate planning where everything would go to charities, and we're going to live off the earnings of the savings. And my goal is, conservative way of thinking is, if you can make 2% return from your saving, if you can live off 2%, fantastic.
We're so alike in so many ways. I always told my kids, my responsibilities to you are threefold: to provide a physically safe and nurturant environment, to give you a moral code, and to provide you with an education. And then you need to make your way in the world. I'm going to suggest that next year we do a roundtable entirely on estate planning and financial planning. But let me ask you another point that I want to get to, both of you. You hear so much now about neuroplasticity. We're going to do the aging process. Do we all need to engage and subscribe to one of these brain health things that we see advertised on television now? Is there anything to that?
I think there's a lot of merit to it. I don't fully understand that, but both physical and mental plasticity need to be addressed. I think Bob touched upon a core strength on physical aspect, and I'm more lumber now than was 10 years ago because I began to focus more on my core, and it's incredibly important. In the same way with the brain, more things you do, the better it becomes.
I think it's critically important. We're nearing the end of our time here, so let me give each of you a chance to impart some parting wisdom. Bob, if you had one thing you could tell people preparing for retirement, what would that be?
Don't think it's not going to come.
And sooner than you think.
Well, even maybe sooner, maybe later, but I watched two of my partners die earlier than they need to because they refused to let go.
Gangahar?
I think we've seen enough friends of ours who want to retire but they can't because of the lack of financial independence. And luckily, the kind of background I had, I began to save from day one. The day I got my first job, I was been putting money away from day one, and that's the key to that. Don't wait for age 50 or 45 or 60. Begin to save. Don't lose quality of life, but do think about your retirement the day you get your first job.
I think we're the only couple in Minnesota that doesn't have a boat, a lake cabin, or an airplane.
Ditto.
Certainly, medicine is a jealous mistress, and especially in this field of cardiac surgery. It demands all our time. It narrows our social circles and our interactions. But you all are very bright people. You know how to reinvent yourselves. What we want to tell you is that planning for retirement is a reinvention, and you need to start years early to plan both for the financial aspects, the health aspects, and the psychological aspects when you do it. We thank you for listening in with us for this roundtable discussion. And gentlemen, I thank you both for being with us.
Thank you
for having us.
And thanks to the STS.